Troubleshooting in Linux. This is our third and final video covering troubleshooting, and what we're going to do in this one is talk about backup problems, application failures, and how to diagnose networking problems. And finally, what I'm going to do is just point you to some resources and show you where you can get more information about problems in Linux and also how you can get help from the Linux community. Let's get started. Let's start by talking about backup and restore errors. There's basically two kinds of problems you can run into: problems on the computer side of things and problems on the backup device side of things. On the computer side of things, you can run into problems with drivers and permissions on devices and files. And on the backup device side of things, you'll run into problems like media errors. Now, the kinds of problems you run into with drivers on the computer side of things is just things like the driver's not there, you've got the wrong driver. So this is really like an installation or setup issue. Once you get some new backup device, you've got to get the right drivers for it and get it all working, and then you'll be fine from there on out. But if you try to back up something to a device and it's there and it's plugged in, but you've got the wrong driver, the computer's going to say something like no such device. Okay? So that's the kind of errors you'll see if you have the wrong driver or bad driver. And then you have problems with device permissions. So even if somebody can read the files that they're looking at and the right drivers are in place, but they don't have permissions to write to the device, there's going to be errors involved with that. And then there's file permissions. Okay, so again, if you're going to back up all these files, you've got to be able to read all the files and directories that you're trying to back up. And so typically the root user does the backups because the root user is going to have the device permissions and the permissions to read all the different files and directories in the system. Right? And then on the backup device side of things, the most common error is media errors. And these can be the worst kind of errors. And the reason is just because, the time you discover these is typically when you're trying to do a restore. You've got your tape, somebody's lost some files, or something's happened to the disk, and now you want to restore some files, and you go to do it from the media, and it says, sorry, it's corrupted. Well, okay, so this is the worst kind of problems. It's like Murphy's Law in action, right? Right when you need the stuff, that's when you discover that it's bad. So the one thing here is do not Gzip your files, okay? Gzip is just a way to compress it on top of tar. So if you're using tar to back up your system, don't Gzip on top of that, because then there's this big long tape here and it's going through the tape, and if this part right here is corrupted, well then the way that Gzip works is that we can't recover any more data on the whole rest of the tape because it's all sort of like this sequential coding to compress it. All right, and so if you're going to use tar by itself and you go through and this part of the tape's corrupted, well, if your file's down here, that's perfectly fine if you've just used tar. But if you use Gzip, we're not going to be able to read that because this is messing it up. Okay, so don't use Gzip with tar. Okay, that's one lesson. Another thing here is just, take care of your backup media. Don't abuse it. Don't stick it in your trunk on some 100-degree summer day because the tape's going to suffer from that. At this place I used to work, we had these, old school, like, big tape drives like this, and for some reason we always got this mail with these little stickers on it. I don't even remember what the mail was anymore, but we always had these stickers laying around in the office, and so we would put the stickers on the tape like this every time we used the tape. And we didn't have that many tapes. It was this university, and we were just sort of like students running the lab and stuff. And we didn't have very many tapes, and we would put these stickers on the tape every time we used the tape. And then when the tape got all filled up with stickers, when we covered the whole surface, then we just threw the tape away. We knew that was like a sign that we had used the tape too many times and we weren't going to risk it anymore. And this is a good policy to have something to say, okay, definitely don't abuse this. And when we've used it so many times, it costs $5 or $10 or $20 or whatever. We got our use out of it, and let's throw it away and buy a new one. Okay, and at really sensitive installations, you're going to have backups of backups. At this bank I used to work at, we did backups every night, and we actually copied the backup tapes and took one of those backup tapes off-site to another branch of the same bank and just kept them there. Okay, even though the computer was at the branch that I worked at, for all the branches, and I did these central backups, we would take the tapes and put them somewhere else, because when we needed a restore for the bank, there was no like, oh, sorry, the tape's corrupted. I had to provide that restore, and it didn't matter whether, if my tape was corrupted, nobody wanted to hear that. They just wanted me to get the backup, so that off-site location was a great spot, great security policy. So in some sense, we had backups of our backups. Now let's move on and talk about how to identify application failures on servers. And these could be web servers or FTP servers or telnet servers or email servers or whatever. Okay? And I want to talk about this from two perspectives. First, from the user's perspective, like you're trying to use some server and it's not working. How do you conclude what's broken along the way? Is it you? Is it them? And so on. And the other perspective is from the system administrator's perspective. So if you're the system administrator of some server and you have to keep that server up and running, how can you do that? What tools can you use to aid you in keeping that server up and running? Okay? So let's talk about it from the user's perspective first. And let's use Telnet as the example. So I'm going to telnet to sdf.lonestar.org. So I telnet there, and I get this login prompt. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me that Telnet's working, it tells me their internet connection's working, and it tells me that my internet connection's working. So everything's coming up roses here, right? Everything's good. But if I try to telnet to some site and it doesn't come up, well, then what's broken? Is it Telnet? Is it their internet connection? Is it my internet connection? And so on. So typically what I do is I keep this list in my head of sites that are, the good sites, okay, they're always up. And every time I've tried to telnet to lonestar.org, it's always working. So this is my, telnet barometer site. If I try to telnet to some site and it doesn't work, I immediately turn around and try to telnet to this site. And if this doesn't work either, then I just conclude that it's me. And we'll talk later in the video about how to get your own network connection up and running again. If this does work, then I can conclude that it's the other server that I was trying to telnet to that's broken, and I'll wait and try again later. Okay, so this is, that's the way I diagnose, telnet problems. For the internet, if I'm trying to bring up some web page and it doesn't work, well, the site that I always go to that's on my good list is google.com. Okay, that site's always up and running. They've got 5 million Linux servers running that site. It's not going down anytime soon. Okay, so that's my barometer site for the web. And that's the way you do things. Like, if you're trying to diagnose these problems, just diagnose whether it's them or whether it's you. And if you can diagnose that it's you, like I said, later in the video, we'll talk about how to get your own internet connection back up and running. Okay, so let me break out of here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is just talk about this from the server's or from the system administrator's perspective. So you're the system administrator of some server, and now what can you do to keep that running? If you look out on the web, there's always these statistics out that say things like, last year there was $25 billion in lost sales because internet connections were slow or sites were down and stuff like that. So if you're the system administrator of some site, and the revenue of the company depends on you keeping that site up and running, what can you do to do that? Well, I've bookmarked some web pages here. One of them is at the site called hotscripts.com. And in that site, they've got this PHP Server Monitoring script that you can grab, for the good price of free. And basically what it does is it just probes your FTP servers, your POP servers, your Telnet servers, your web servers, and it probes them every 5 or 10 minutes, whatever you set up, and it says things like, okay, yeah, this site's down, and then it'll send you some email when that site's not working, and then you can immediately get on it. So if the site's working for not working for a few minutes, you're going to get a notification and you can get right on that. So if this is a revenue critical site that's running, you're going to be right on it, and it's not going to be down for very long. Okay, there's other things out there too. Perlcoders.com. Perl's just another language like PHP. It's a good web-based language for this kind of stuff. And this script here is a system monitoring script. Again, it monitors all sorts of stuff. It monitors, all the different services that you can have. It monitors memory usages, and so on. Okay, so again, both of these scripts are good tools to help you as a system administrator keep your sites up. You can't be bothered, every 5 minutes all day long checking to make sure the sites are up. And maybe somebody else in your company is going to notice it and tell you about it, but you don't want to rely on that. If you've got some monitor script in place that can probe your servers every few minutes and tell you as soon as it discovers something's wrong, you can get right on it. And this is this thing's working 24 hours a day and it doesn't get paid, right? So it's your best employee there. And that's the side of it from the system administrator side. That's the perspective from the system administrator side, is you just want to keep track of all the servers that you're responsible for and keep them running. So to troubleshoot networking problems, you're going to use some of the tools we talked about back when we set up networking, like ping and ifconfig and route and those sort of things. And I'll review those and just talk about them more in the context of troubleshooting. Okay, so let's move over to the whiteboard, and I'm going to draw out a diagram here of just the structure of the network and then how we can test each aspect of the network. Then we'll come back to the Linux screen and actually do those tests. Now let's talk about the structure of the network that you're connected to. And some of this is going to be a review from when we set up networking, but I just want to make sure all the concepts and the terms are fresh in your memory so that when we do the troubleshooting part, all that stuff will make sense and sink in. Okay, so here you are sitting at your computer, and your computer's got this IP address. Okay, and remember, it's 4 numbers, and each number